What's going on, guys? Going to give you all a more intimate video today because I don't have a visual aid, but I want to talk about frame. This is an idea you've probably heard if you've been in the manosphere, even if you've been in red pill circles. You've probably heard people talk about the concept of frame and what frame is. And whether or not you're aware of the concept, it's 100% impacting you and your dating success. And I would argue any success you get in any kind of domain. So you probably have experienced, if you've gotten into a relationship before that's ended, you probably have had the experience of, things starting great. The woman's into you. She's, kind of in your world. She's talking like you. She's, into your hobby. She wants to spend all her time with you. She allows you to lead. And then at some point in the relationship, you observe a flip. Change in behavior, a change in orientation. They stop being up under you as much. They stop, wanting to spend time with you. They stop viewing you through the lens of respect, right? Maybe that results in disrespectful behavior, them diminishing your worth, and they leave the relationship, essentially. They end it. A lot of guys are going to experience this crucible. Or maybe if you've not gotten into a relationship, you've experienced women just not being attracted to you. You're not getting positive interactions with women. And this is partially due to maybe how you carry yourself, maybe your look, maybe your tonality, maybe your lack of confidence. But all of this can be reduced to frame. Not understanding what frame is, and more importantly, not being able to influence frame in your favor. Now, the question is, what is frame? The question of the day. Frame is essentially the meaning that you give to a situation, right? It is the narrative or the story around what you give to a particular experience, right? Everything is frame. This reality that we exist in is frame. Religion is frame. Sales is frame. Your self-concept, how you view yourself, your identity is frame. How you view another individual is frame. Frame is the underpinning of all aspects of society. And understanding it will allow you to see the matrix, right? It will allow you to influence events without people being even aware of what you're doing. Now, I'm not saying this from a manipulation perspective. We don't want to manipulate. We want to influence in a win-win scenario, right? Everything that I tell y'all is going to be with the emphasis of things being win-win. We're not trying to be transactional and use people. That's how we create more bad apples in a sense, right? So, frame is the meaning that you give a situation. This is incredibly important because what you have to understand is everyone has a frame. Every single person has a particular worldview or a perspective, which are other words for frame, that they view the world or particular events. And the important thing to realize is when two frames come together, there has to be a dominant frame. The more dominant and stronger frame normally consumes the other person's frame. So as I talked about in relationships, when you see the woman basically taking on your perspective of things, taking on your lingo, taking on your hobbies and your activities, that's essentially her living in your frame. Okay? She's living in your frame. And when relationships end, it's typically because the woman has exited your frame and is now in her frame. And that's kind of because you maybe had a weak moment or maybe had a number of weak moments that have weakened your frame, have weakened your confidence, have weakened her trust in your clarity and your certainty and your confidence, which then causes her to exit your frame. And that dynamic, her frame now, becomes stronger. When women say they want leaders, when they say they want men who are dominant, when they say they want, a protector or a provider, they're saying they want a man with strong frame, strong self-belief, bordering lines of delusion at times. That's why being cocky kind of works with women, because while delusional, it does show that you have a lot of conviction behind your perspective, the words and behaviors that you employ. So if you are able to have a strong, solid frame, you're going to notice that leadership, influence, dating, relationships is going to be a lot easier, right? Because the average person has never even heard this terminology before. The average person is not even thinking about this. And just being aware of it makes you more powerful. So now that we know what frame is and we know the downsides of having a weak frame, the question becomes, how can you strengthen your frame? It's difficult. It's very difficult, but it's worth the effort. You see, when you have conviction in yourself, when you have a lot of self-belief, and more importantly, when you have evidence that what you believe yourself to be true, this strengthens your frame, okay? Another word for frame is just confidence. Are you confident in who you are? Do you believe that you're the prize, right? Do you believe that you have value to contribute? This level of belief is going to be subtly influencing and affecting how people perceive you. There are stories of Steve Jobs where, like, you know, he was viewed as like an asshole, but he also was viewed as somebody who was able to do the impossible. The people who were around him, he was able to have them achieve things that they thought they were not able to achieve. He would give his engineers like a very short timeline to accomplish certain tasks that they thought would take 10 times as much time. But because he has so much conviction and belief, they took on his belief as their own. They were in his frame. They said that he had something called the reality distortion field. That's essentially, he has so much belief and conviction of how he saw the world that other people had no choice but to follow. When you see cult leaders, right? Cult leaders just have strong frames. Because what you have to understand is that most people, NPCs, the normies of the world, are walking around with uncertainty. They're just uncertain. Humans need certainty. It's a big need of ours. Most people walking around uncertain. So when they come across a person who has such a high level of certainty, they naturally drift towards that person. They're magnetized by it, right? So if you're like a cult leader, all you are weaponizing is your ability to have a godly amount of certainty. And since people want certainty, they follow you, right? Now, I'm not advocating for y'all to lead cults, all right? I'm just explaining the psychology behind how it works. Now, cultivating a solid frame is difficult, especially if you're coming from a weaker frame, right? Especially if you're someone who has low self-esteem, not a lot of belief, someone who doesn't have a lot of confidence. Developing frame is going to be challenging, but it's not impossible. The first thing that you have to do is take micro steps, focus on what you control, and reframe events in your favor, okay? So what's the difference between like a guy who approaches a woman, gets rejected, and gets down on himself and tells himself that he's not going to approach a woman again, from a guy who approaches a woman, still gets rejected, but it kind of boosts his confidence? How are these people able to experience the exact same stimuli, but have completely different outcomes? Frame is the answer. Therapists talk about this all the time. When you go to a therapist, what they help you do is reframe events, meaning they empower you to create a different story around what happened. And creating a different story has a different emotional impact. So the guy who's able to approach women, get rejected, and it not ruin his self-esteem, one, isn't taking it personally. Two, is probably framing, giving meaning, a different meaning to those events. For example, guys who I know who are good with women, if like a woman doesn't want them, they just say she has bad taste. You see how that protects you a bit? You see how that protects your confidence? Oh, she just has bad taste. Don't bother me. She's obviously a woman who makes bad decisions all the time. I wouldn't want her anyway. If she don't like me, she's probably used to making bad decisions. I don't need that in my life. See what I'm saying? Another way that you can go about doing this is, I know some guys who, when they approach and they get rejected, they focus on the fact that they did something courageous. Like, yeah, she didn't want me, but like, who else has the balls to approach a woman like that, right? I just did something that 99% of men are unwilling to do. I'm really him for real. Whereas the other guy's like, see, nobody wants me. She rejected me. I've only approached 2 women in my entire life, and both of them rejected me. So of course, they're going to be a representation of the billions of women who are on the planet. It's nonsense. You need to be able to cultivate this self-belief. And the big part of doing that is reframing events in your favor. When you're choosing a narrative or a meaning to assign to things, you have to be able to reframe it in a way that empowers you. Every situation empowers you. You don't get the job, it was going to be a bad fit anyway. You get in traffic, I probably was just saved from an accident. You know what I mean? Reframe events in a positive way. What I'm telling you is incredibly powerful, because what you're going to find is this is going to make you more content, satisfied, and happy and joyful with life when you get into the habit of doing this. This goes beyond just dating and relationships. Yeah, it's going to help you get women. Yeah, it's going to help you with dating and relationships, but it's going to help you with life in general, because it's going to protect your self-esteem. It's going to keep you getting momentum, and it's going to facilitate more positive interactions. So this is a concept you have to be able to really integrate into you got to embody this shit. Okay. You got to embody this shit. So what are some signs of like a weak frame? How can you start reading this in your behavior and the behavior of other people? One clear indicator is the person who is reacting to the other individual is in that person's frame. You see what I'm saying? If you're talking to someone and you're just reacting to them, you're in their frame. If you're talking to someone, they're reacting to you, they're in your frame, right? These are, when you start really understanding this, you'll see it everywhere. You'll see, oh, that person's in that person's frame. Oh, she's in his frame, right? The person who's more reactionary is the person who is not leading the dynamic. When you have frame, you are leading the dynamic. People are following your lead. It's like a dance. When you're dancing with someone, somebody has to be the leader of that dance. And this is why I keep trying to tell y'all how important this concept is for attraction. You know, I have this concept, if you've seen my TikTok video, about spark and safety, right? I tell you to lead with spark. Why? When you lead with spark, you are framing yourself as an attractive guy, okay? You're literally framing yourself as a viable option for that woman. Why do you not want to lead with safety? Because you're framing yourself as a man who is just safe and not a threat. You're framing yourself as just this kind, nice guy. And that's not to say that you can't shift the frame again to being an attractive man, an actual romantic option for her, but you're going to be fighting an uphill battle because you quite literally have to change how she perceives you. It's going to require a lot of effort when you could have just saved all that time and just led with spark to begin with. Okay? Now, the important thing with frame is, if we apply this to dating and relationships, the reason why a lot of men lose frame in relationships is because women are wired from a biological perspective, of an evolutionary perspective, to test the man she's with. She wants to know that she made the right decision. Okay? She wants to know that she made the right decision, that she picked the right guy, that she picked a strong man who she can trust to lead her. Okay? The way that women have evolved to make sure that the person that they're with is someone who is actually capable of holding that mantle is they engage in what is called shit tests. She's going to test your frame, right? She's going to complain. She's going to nag. She's going to push back on things. And remember, when I said the person who is reacting has lost frame. When you hear guys say that you don't argue with women, that doesn't mean you don't have disagreements. That doesn't mean that arguments don't happen sometimes. But generally speaking, the reason why you don't argue is because if you're arguing, you're reacting. You have to respond, don't react. Okay? When you integrate this and understand it and start implementing it, you'll notice that when you don't argue, when you respond instead of react, when you remain unmovable and stoic, that causes people to trust you more and more. And as you pass these tests, you're going to see that they occur less frequently. But this is partially why, like, being in a relationship is so difficult, right? Because in order to succeed in a relationship, you have to have rock solid frame. You really got to be him. You have to be unshakable, and you can never take your foot off the gas, because the moment you do, you're going to get tested. You're going to fail that test. And if you do that enough, she's out the door, right? Or if she stays with you, it's not going to be the relationship you want. It'll dry her up, quite literally. okay? You have to maintain frame in all situations. But for the neurodivergent people out there, don't take this too far. You do want to have an awareness of frame, but you don't want to always be like, I gotta have the frame, right? Like you don't want to go into social situations and always try to dominate the frame. That's just going to make you off-putting. There's a time and a place for it, right? There's a time and a place for it. You just need to have a general awareness of how this shit works, okay? Because then again, you'll be able to influence things in your favor. So we're going to talk about this more. I know I just kind of scratched the surface on it. We'll get more tactical into how you can maintain frame in all situations. But I want you all to have just a general idea of how this stuff works and to start noticing it. Just start noticing who's reacting to who. You know, even if you're just people watching, who's reacting to who? Who has the frame here, right? Why do they have the frame here? What are they doing to maintain frame? And when you start noticing this, you'll naturally start embodying it more. So I hope this video helps. Leave a comment. Tell me where you think your frame is weakest, what you're going to do to strengthen your frame. And I'll see you on the next one.